Carmen Prema has been teaching and studying yoga for over 35 years. And personally, she's my favorite yoga teacher for the depth of her knowledge, the beauty and humility of her being, for her wisdom. In this conversation, we talk about how Carmen first got into yoga, what integral yoga is all about, what can be and can't be considered yoga, and what's the relevance of this ancient wisdom for our meta-modern times. I'm Carlota, and this is Wiser Now. So, Carmen, I'm very happy to be here with you. This is our first episode. I just want to introduce us a bit. So I met you in 2021, I believe. A friend of mine recommended your teacher training. And then ever since, I did my TTC and we stayed in touch on and off throughout the years. And now I felt also visiting you here and we were just talking, exploring a potential collaboration. I felt it was also a good opportunity to have an exchange, because as a student, there's much I would love to learn from you. Yeah, and also give your students the chance to hear from you more in the digital world. Yeah, so just welcome to the space.
Thank you, Carlota, for having the idea and also have the enthusiasm of doing this. I always liked to collaborate with you, even when you were a student. Now you are a very good and already consecrated yoga teacher, so that's actually very nice and beautiful. So thank you for inviting me, for wanting me to be more present in your life and maybe to bring this to the ones that maybe you'll find inspiration.
So let's start. For this first episode, I thought it would be helpful to know a bit also of your background. And I'm curious, actually, how did you get into yoga?
It was, I was very young. I was 24. I already had a son of 1 year old. And then we saw just an announcement and we have been there and I adored the practice. And actually what fascinated me and what actually conquered me about yoga practice, it was that I was coming from a high performance sport practice. So I was coming from there. So I was I am 5 times national champ in rowing, which is a heavy sport. And when I discovered yoga, when I started to practice yoga, I observed how actually you can use your body, work your body without losing the energy and actually winning the energy. I still remember after my first yoga classes, how amazed I was that after the class, instead of being exhausted as I was after the training in rowing, I was full of energy. And we started strong. So our yoga classes were lasting more or less 3 hours and a half. So that was
yoga classes.
Yeah, one yoga class. So it was really, actually, I was lucky to start to practice like this because this introduced me into the deepness of yoga from the beginning. So my yoga teacher, she was really very good.
So was it, I assume it was a 3-hour class, then it was a more traditional yoga class, no?
Yes, that was the luck that I had. Maybe I wouldn't be very interested into a more stretching physical yoga class because that was what I was doing actually into all my daily life by training.
What kind of yoga was it?
It was an integral yoga, but the Sri Aurobindo line of integral yoga. That's what I followed all my life, actually.
And besides that experience that throughout this practice, you're actually creating energy, what else did you love about this practice that actually
in the beginning or what I love now after 30 years of practicing,
first at the beginning
35
and then
years.
It can be now, yeah?
Well, in the beginning, what I really adored was the most evident effect was about the physical body, that it was so light and so nice. But then I noticed the calmness. Then I noticed the easiness of being myself. I was struggling because I was very tall and I was living into where I'm 184, so 184 centimeters tall. And on that age, generally, everyone was 160, 170. So it actually released me from this trying to adapt to something that it was not me. So I started to be able to be myself without struggling, gave me confidence. Although I was a high performance sport woman, I still gained this kind of a different kind of confidence, not the competitive confidence, that confidence that led you to be what you are, as you are. And not also sometimes, you have, when you are very young, the tendency to show to the world. So this necessity disappeared with the yoga practice. And then, of course, what it was really amazing, it was how through the yoga practice, I started to understand my spiritual dimension.
Were you on a spiritual path before, consciously?
No, no, actually, yeah, maybe like a Christian, going to church, having the Christmas, having the Eastern celebrations, but not. Actually, after I started to practice yoga, I started to pay more attention to what religion means, to what brings into myself, for society, when it is correctly practiced, but without the dogma. So what I really, really understood through the yoga practice is that dogma is completely different of spirituality. Religious dogma is completely different of spirituality. And this freed me a lot, actually.
And what is spirituality for you?
Well, what is spirituality for me? I really think that this sense of what we are searching through life, it comes from this spiritual calling of being happy. That happiness that doesn't depend of desires, doesn't depend of what we would like to, is just here, pure and simple. We just have to identify it, to remember about ourselves, to remember of how we are. We really have this physical dimension, but also have the mental dimension, the emotional dimension. And yet, this is not enough, because all these three parts of our being, 3 dimensions of our being, are coming and going. And there is something like a longing that is constant. That longing, that constance, that every single time when you are touching it, it brings you this sense of lightness, of not purpose, of I don't know, existence as it is. That's spirituality for me.
The connection to something greater.
If you want, not necessarily something greater, but the connection of something that it is always here with us. And this feeling of coming back home every single time you are succeeding in being aware of this spiritual dimension that we are having. And of course, we can reach it, and it's perfectly accessible to everyone when you fall in love, when we are admiring a flower, or you can feel this wonder. That's the call of God, if you want, but not something external, but also this essence that is inside, that it remains, whatever the body is still here or not, whatever the mind is present or not.
And I'm curious also, because then you ran into this class of integral yoga, basically. How would you explain what integral yoga is, and maybe how it differs from other yoga schools?
I think it's not me to explain it, because it's not my term. It's a term that Sri Aurobindo brought it. Aurobindo was a great, great yogi and a great spirit of our, as humans, of us as humans. And he is having a beautiful history of life. So he was raised and educated into the Western society. His parents prohibited his teachers to teach him anything about Indian culture until, when he was performed from since 7 years old until 23 years old, I think. He was educated in in England. So he developed as a Western mind. And then when he visited India for the first time, he get mesmerized by its own culture, actually. And he started to practice yoga, and he started to fight for the liberation of India. And so he went in jail. There are a lot of funny stories. We don't talk now about them, but funny, interesting, actually. And then he realized that that's not the way from his point of view. He was a great journalist. And that this kind of political fight that he was performing on that time, he was 23, was very young, 23. 24.
As an activist.
As an
Fighting
activist,
for the liberation.
yes, is not the way. He understood, he had this inspiration that society will only change when people will start to introduce into their daily life the divine, to integrate their divine essence, the awareness of their divine essence in whatever they are doing into their daily life. So he used to say to live here a divine life, live here on earth a divine life. So that's integration yoga. Of course, integral yoga is integrating also in order to be able to integrate the divine or non, is using all the yoga techniques that are suitable for bringing harmony, for liberating each one of us from patterns that are still cloistering us, that are still keeping us.
So let me see if I understand it. Is that it matters less maybe the kind of yoga that is practiced? It's actually practicing different yogas from karma yoga, vinyasa, hatha, and it's more about the integration of the human being, the harmony and the spiritual development.
This one, and it's about also how you integrate the yoga techniques. You can take from different schools, how you integrate them to adapt them to your own necessities in order to reach your divine essence, the Atman, to fusion, to unify yourself, because that's what yoga means as a Sanskrit word, union, fusion. So to reach this union, this fusion, while you are still alive, and to use it to live a divine life here on earth.
So I have two questions. One is that when I was reading about Sri Aurobindo and integral yoga, one of the things that I found very fascinating is that, in my understanding, in most yoga schools of thought, there's the focus is that union of the Atman with the Brahman. So there's a movement of ascending, of becoming one with the skies more. And what Sri Aurobindo, in my understanding, was also proposing, yes, we also want that, and that's why we meditate and we practice asana so that we can meditate for longer and we seek that state of samadhi. And it's also about the other movement from the skies to the earth of materializing that divine life. Is this how you see it? Because for me, I perceive that is an assumption of different yoga practice, that it's about also improving the material life on this earth. So how do you think about this? How do you interpret this?
I interpret this that if we want to have here on earth a full experience of what we are, we should start by remembering about ourselves. Because sometimes we perceive ourselves only with the parts of what we are able to be aware of. But doesn't mean that we are reduced on only this. All the other
For
potential.
example, the emotional part, the physical part.
Physical part. But we still have the potential, like we use only 10% of the brain. And still what is happening with the other 90%? Why do we have them? What is the purpose for us to live here? Why this incarnation? Why this kind? What is provoking actually my destiny and what is happening here? So all these questions are not to find something external or to improve your physical existence, are actually tools or directions through which you can use this physical existence as a tool to remember about yourself. That's how I see things. And what means to remember about yourself? why do I have more 90% of my brain there in potential and I'm not using? What is keeping me from using it? Why do I have this longing and whatever desire I fulfill, it's not enough? What is keeping me from being free or happy? So how should I find myself? That's the idea. And actually, if we would translate, because you're talking about the different forms of yoga. If we translate that word, the yoga, which is a Sanskrit word, so if we translate it into the language that we are talking, like union, then the phrase will look like the different forms of union, of the fusion. So when you are seeing things like this, it's not like you are separated into only one part of yoga, but actually you are using some tools that are helping you to reach the union, which is whatever path you are using is the same.
And then do you think that everything can be yoga? Like, let's say that I have a writing practice where I'm going very deep in myself. Would you accept that as a form of yoga?
If you are seeing this from the union point of view, yes. But the question here is the union of what with what. So if your writing practice, this insight is bringing you to that knowledge of the microcosm and microcosm coming together into the heart, into this divine essence of everything, then yes, it is a union, it is a fusion, because that's what yoga, Brahman and Atman, using two Sanskrit terms. So if your writing is bringing you to the truth that Rumi is revealing into his poetry of your essence, about your essence and the essence of everything, of course, I can call it yoga.
And how would you make then the case? So let's say, and it can be writing, it can be any profession. For example, a doctor that is fully in service to his patients or her patients can also be practicing yoga. So then why would you make the case for practicing the traditional practice of yoga or integral yoga through asana, through learning the principles and so on? How would you make the case for why it's still important to go into that?
Okay, so let's see first, what is the idea of this union? So you don't reach this union only through yoga. Yoga is not the only one that brings you into your divine essence. If you are using authentic spiritual paths that existed along history and they are still present today, and you apply them properly and correctly with this sense, then you reach the same truth. We have the beautiful example in yoga of Ramakrishna that followed the path of Hinduism, then followed the path of Christianism, and then he followed different religious paths, and he reached the same divine liberation, the same Samadhi. So, and this is just an example. There are a lot of other beings that reach this. So why not being a doctor to reach this? Swami Shivananda was a doctor, a medical doctor. And then he became a great yoga teacher, and he was a Brahman, and then he became a liberated living being. So he found the Atman with Atman. So he was in yoga into this existence.
How would you begin talking about what that liberation state is and looks like?
So this liberation state, as described by the others, it is actually this state of union, of yoga. So you can call Samadhi Nirvana, or if you want, you can call it yoga, like union, the fusion. Like Patanjali says that this is possible when only with the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. So whatever you are doing, you are a surgeon, you are into operation, and all your mind sees this activity because it's so strongly focused to solve the problem, the surgery on that moment, then that is a moment of fusion, of yoga. The problem is not to reach it, the problem is to keep it into your daily life. after you finish it. So traditional yoga, modern yoga is again another way of creating boundaries, another way of separating things, while we should come with all together to that flow of the unity.
What do you mean now with the modern yoga and the traditional yoga?
So because you said if your question was something like, okay, so if I can reach this
through other ways,
union in other ways, then why to use traditional yoga? It's not a necessary thing, but what it happens with yoga is that it was developed along the huge period of time. So the first proofs about yoga existence are dating for 4,000 years. So in Hindu Valley, that sigils or coins, I don't know, maybe it's incorrect, with a yogi in meditation posture, are the proof, archaeological proof about the existence of yoga. Also, yoga mentioned into the Upanishads, in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, and then with the yoga treatise. And what yoga developed, so it's, from my knowledge, maybe there are others, the oldest in time that resisted until today, and it's so applicable to the human being.
Yeah.
And inside the yoga path, independently what kind of yoga is developed, there is this structure. So the tools that they're offering, that very sophisticated mechanisms that are so actual. So they are actually, if you want, you can call yoga the science of man, because yoga is working not only the spirituality, is actually englobing the spirituality into our physical dimension, bringing longevity and health to the body. It's balancing our energy flow. And then, of course, it brings us into this union and fusion. Also, it's teaching us how to control our mind. And the methods, the yoga methods, whatever kind of you use them, are actually very, very efficient. So, yeah.
Yeah, what I experienced, because I did the teacher training in 2021 and I began teaching immediately, so I wouldn't not do it. And then, I had a full-time job. I was doing my writing on the side and the yoga teaching, and I felt a bit overwhelmed. And also that's a big responsibility to be in a place that you're teaching yoga and you're sharing yoga. So I felt there was something there with my integrity, because I was not showing up, that I felt like, okay, let's take a step back. And I stopped teaching for a while. And then I really dedicated myself to the writing. And I was doing my yoga practice, but I started to really miss it, because even if, I'm on a spiritual path and I have several practices, I also do other new age practices, breath work and so on. But I feel that there's something about yoga being really coming from lineages, this ancient wisdom that was understood by many people, integrated by many people. There's a depth there that I cannot find in this jumping around in practices. And there's something else. I think there's many options. You can study the Bible, you can study Tai Chi, Qigong, and so on. And this was the one that resonated with me. And what I feel it is about is the discipline. And I think also the chance to also have access to a yoga teacher that is more advanced is super helpful. And for me, also what's important is, and what I love about the integral yoga and Sri Aurobindo's work, is that it has a very strong intellectual part for people that are interested in the philosophy. And then it's really 360, all the dimensions of being. So the body, the practice, the meditation, the breath work, the yoga principles. And I feel that there's a quality of presence and of meditation that I had glimpses of the possibilities, but I know that I don't know the whole territory that is there. So I feel that's why I'm attracted to Sundari school and to you and Eugene. I just have that experience that there's so much more depth that comes only with patience and with years of practice.
With experience. Experience is the one that is changing our habits. But then again, experience in what? We embraced the yoga philosophy when I discovered it, and I was lucky also to discover it when I was very young. So I had a lot of energy that I had a lot of material to modulate, to transform, to change the frequencies. Of course, doesn't matter. You can practice yoga at whatever age after 7. And also for children, you can do it in a playful way. It will help them to don't forget about their purity and about their rooting into also their spiritual dimension. But what it is actually valuable into the yoga practice is exactly as you said, this rooting into the. So actually, yoga is assumed. Yoga as you know it today.
Is a what?
Assume a togetherness of generations of humans that in our modern times we are a little bit spoiled with the technicalities, with the science, with all this beautiful physical luxury that we are affording. But on that times when yoga started to born and to be developed, the ancient yogis reached these techniques, reached these conclusions through direct observation of themselves. So that's why I'm calling that the science of the human being, because the object of the yoga study, if you want, for these ancient people was themselves. And then everything what they put together, it created the basis. And what is really beautiful is that if you study yoga on the deep, it's always better to start the tradition and from this tradition to go until your time, because this brings you the foundation and then you understand how this foundation was modulated from generation to generation. Then if you go to yoga and then if you go to Taoism, of course, they look like two different paths, but they are having the same essence because they are both searching what? The divine. You go to Buddhism, which is having a background of yoga practice, and then again you find the same longing for the essence, for what is eternal and resisted during time, during conjunctures, during whatever it happens with our lives or with our history as humans, as humanity. The same we can talk about Christianism, the same we can talk about Zoroastrianism. So you will find in each one of these spiritual paths that were developed by people during history, we can find the same. So of course, a lot of differences, but each one of them, if you know how to look, you will see that they have a common point. And that common point is exactly what yoga means, this union between Brahman, between macrocosm, between universe, and your inner universe, the microcosm.